Hi, welcome to another episode of Be Science Literate. I'm your host, Andy Epton. And, well, it looks like we're here again, back to another lockdown situation. This happened back in March. I remember March 13th was my last day teaching in a school with students, and I still haven't been back to school with students yet. And I've been teaching now since the beginning of September here in Michigan, and we're virtual, and we're going to be virtual, especially now since Governor Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, has established that high schools are going to be all virtual until who knows when. It's a 3 week lockdown essentially. It's not quite a lockdown though. There's still places that are going to be open, either for personal or individual needs, but for the most part we are locked down again because of the fact that we couldn't follow the rules back in the previous lockdown. So back in March, the whole country essentially established some sort of lockdown, but it was state by state because our federal government decided they weren't going to institute any sort of mandate about what should be done or should not be done. And then they criticized various states for being too strict or too severe and restricting too many rights, which I don't quite get because there are no rights guaranteed in the Constitution that during a pandemic you have the right to go out and kill people because you don't believe that this pandemic is real. I don't understand that. That's not anywhere in the Constitution. Your rights do not actually exist in that fashion or in that manner. So I'm still trying to figure that one out. But this is science, not history. So the various governors instituted these lockdowns and these controls of social distancing, closing restaurants, closing bars, um, restricting access to all sorts of different locations. And if you did go to these locations, you had to wear a mask. And a lot of the governors issued what they called emergency executive orders. And they did have these orders or these powers granted to them by their own state constitutions to do these particular things. But they weren't long term, they were short term. And so the long term effect of this pandemic was never really thought about. So, for instance, in Michigan, we had our emergency executive orders from our governor nullified just a few months ago by the state Supreme Court because they determined that the original wording of the Constitution of Michigan's Constitution gave Governor Whitmer the ability to administer certain executive orders for 28 days. This was months later. So they determined that she was beyond her power to do that and she had to work with the legislature. Well, the problem is the legislature of Michigan is very much against all these lockdown measures because they feel it inhibits free market or capitalism or the economy or some excuse along those lines. And so they weren't going to work with her. So she did what she had to do, or she felt she had to do. Yes, she basically violated her powers. She overstepped her bounds officially, according to the state Supreme Court and the state Constitution. But again, this is not a normal situation. This is a global pandemic. We are still dealing with this. Everywhere around the world is still dealing with this. The problem is America deals with it a lot worse than everybody else. Our cases are soaring. Are over 7 million, possibly up to 8 million cases in our country since March. We are over 240,000 to 250,000 deaths. We're seeing cases go up to 100,000, 120, 140,000 cases a day since the election. That, by the way, was supposed to end all of this because it was apparently a political ploy. It's not a political ploy. People are getting sick and people are dying. ICU beds across the country are filling up. Hospitals are just scrambling to find some sort of place to put people. The last time I've read about something along these lines was the 1918 influenza pandemic, where hospitals were completely overwhelmed and were putting people on the floor. And when the person in the bed died, they would put the person on the floor in the bed, and then they too would die in just a few minutes or a few hours. And then the person on the floor would cut back in, would be able to get into that person's bed, and so on and so forth. It was an assembly line of sorts. I'm not saying that people are dying necessarily in that type of numbers here in this pandemic, but it is incredibly severe, and we're seeing no slowdown. There's no slowdown. People often say this is the third wave. This is not the third wave. We're still technically on the first wave. There never was a second wave. There was never a significant decrease in the numbers to constitute a new wave. It did slow down a little bit after the summer months. It dropped a little bit, but it did not drop so significantly as to constitute some sort of new spike or new wave of infection. This is a continuation of the previous wave. This is a continuation of the very beginning. It has not stopped. People pretend like this has gone away. It has not gone away. Yes, people have started to take a little bit more liberties with their freedoms, if you will. They've been able to go and visit people. They've had, parties. They've had outings. They've gotten together. There've been, the president had rallies of, thousands of people sometimes, and they were usually without masks. And there've been, yes, the protests without masks have also contributed to this. This is not going away. We are literally doing almost everything we can possibly do wrong in this situation. We should not be in these types of situations. We should not be gathering in such large numbers. We never should have been. Since March, we should have ended all of that. I find it interesting that, again, in March 13th, my state, Virginia, my previous state, Virginia, had 30 cases. I've said this before. At the beginning of school, at the end of August, I should say, Virginia had over, what was it, 70,000 cases, something along those lines. And they were talking about going to school. They shut down for 30 and decided in the tens of thousands they're going to go back. That's okay. That's that's obscene. That's absolutely obscene. And I don't fully understand. Yes, I know kids need um, socializing. They need that social contact. They need to be able to talk to people. I know my own son had a lot of or benefited greatly when he was able to go face to face and talk with actual students in his classroom. I understand that. That's great, but it's also putting people at risk and endangering lives because there's no need for that. Sorry, that was him in the background that was making all that noise. So, anyway, where was I? Oh, yes, he's going to school from time to time. Now, we haven't gone to school this week due to an illness in the family, not COVID, but there was some concern, so we've been quarantining because there is that always that possibility now. But the governor of our state of Michigan and governors of other states have decided to again re-lock down things or do another lockdown because people just aren't following the rules. And it's been kind of sadly funny or tragically funny, if you will, to see some of these people that have complained since the outset about wearing masks, about not being able to go out into public or not being able to gather, not being able to have barbecues or parties or this, that, and the other. Now saying, well, you told us mask wearing would work. Clearly it didn't work. They're the ones not wearing the masks. They're the ones who have defied this order from the start and are causing us to come back and do this again. I feel terrible for the healthcare workers. I feel terrible for the independent business owners. I feel terrible for the service industry. Those people are going to suffer because adults can't follow directions. And that's really what it boils down to. All you have to do is social distance. Okay? All you have to do is social distance. And when you can't socially distance, wear a mask. Wear a mask. I don't understand why. What are we? We're in November, so 8 months in, we're still having a debate in the public eye as to whether or not masks are effective. Masks are effective. Are they a guarantee that you won't get sick? No. No, they're not. Nothing is, unless you literally stay in your house and never come into contact with any other person for until this is over, which I don't know when it will be over. But that's not possible for most people, for almost everybody. That's just not possible. So the best thing we can do is wear a mask. The masks have been shown to be effective. So many studies have been done in the last 8 months to demonstrate just how effective a simple cloth mask is. It's almost as effective as the fancy N95 mask. Not quite, but it is very, very close. It's a lot better than nothing. These people that say, well, masks aren't effective or masks aren't guarantees that you won't get sick, so I don't wear a mask, that's just ridiculous. Of course, it's not a guarantee that you're not going to get sick. It can't do that. Nothing can. This virus is insidious. It will get through somehow or another, but you can severely lower your risk of catching it or spreading it by just wearing a mask when you're around other people. It's a very simple thing. No, you will not get poisoned by carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide. First off, you don't breathe out carbon monoxide. Second, the carbon dioxide is actually going to pass through the mask. If you couldn't breathe out carbon dioxide, you couldn't get oxygen. If you can't get oxygen, then you certainly can't get a virus, which is a lot bigger than the oxygen. So the oxygen's going to pass through. The carbon dioxide is going to pass through. You'll be fine. You are not going to suffocate. You are not going to suffer. You're not going to experience oxygen deprivation or carbon dioxide poisoning. That's not anything that's going to happen. So many people in the last 8 months have worn masks all day long and with no ill effects whatsoever. None. And the fact that we still have people complaining about wearing a mask, still have people who believe that wearing a mask is dangerous and violates their rights. Again, I would love for them to point out somewhere in the Constitution where it says that you have the right to not wear a mask or have a right to somehow endanger the public in a pandemic or in a health issue, a public health issue. It's not in there. It's not in there. And yet people pretend that they have these rights somewhere along the line, somewhere in this document they claim to know so very well. It's just not in there. There's no such thing as the right to not wear a mask. There's no such thing as the right to, again, endanger public health simply for your own selfishness. And that's what it is. It is selfishness. If you don't want to wear a mask, then don't go anywhere. Stay in your home and just don't go anywhere. By going somewhere, by not wearing your mask, you're not sticking it to the man. You're not showing the government who's boss or who's going to run your life. All you're doing is potentially infecting every single person you come into contact with. Because, again, even though wearing a mask is a protection against getting sick, it is not a guarantee. So if somebody goes out into the public without a mask on and they're asymptomatic, meaning they are infected, but they don't have any symptoms, so they don't know they're sick, then they could spread this virus onto and into every single person they come into contact with. Because again, even though the mask is a barrier, it's not perfect and the virus can slip through. So if we all wear our masks, then the likelihood of, again, the virus passing from one person to the next is minimized to an extreme degree. There's no there's no health exemptions to this. There's no religious exemptions. This was a thing early on, and again, it's still being um, triumphed or getting thrown out there. Like, hey, I've got a medical exemption. No, you don't. There is no such thing as a medical exemption to wearing a mask. You can wear a mask and be suffering from extreme lung disease, but you still can wear a mask. You can suffer from horrible asthma and still wear a mask. You can have emphysema and still wear a mask. You can have all these breathing problems and still wear a mask. Will it make you anxious? Probably. Will it make you feel claustrophobic? Yes. But it's not real in the sense that you're not going to die by wearing a mask. You could get sick by not wearing a mask. You could end up on a breathing apparatus because you didn't wear a mask. So I find that the risks outweigh potential the risks of not wearing a mask outweigh the potential of risks of wearing a mask by a long shot. I mean, it's orders of magnitude difference here between wearing a mask and not wearing a mask. The risks of not wearing are just tremendous compared to wearing a mask. So please, I can't say it enough. Wear your mask. Please wear your mask. It's that simple. It's incredibly simple. Now I realize that we are used to certain things. We have this holiday seasons upon us. Next week is Thanksgiving. This is being recorded on November 16th or 17th, one of those days. 17th. So next week is Thanksgiving, just a few days away. And I know we like to gather for Thanksgiving. We like to gather together and eat our food and talk and watch, football or whatever your tradition is. But this year is not like any other year. This year is different. This year, nothing is the same. You can't just go and act like nothing is different. You can't act like there's not a pandemic going around. There is a pandemic. And we don't have a cure for it. Not yet. We're working on that, or at least some sort of preventative measure with our vaccines. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. And then after Thanksgiving, we have Christmas. I don't know what Christmas is going to look like. I don't know what things are going to be, how they're going to be. But I do know this pandemic is not going to be over by Christmas. This pandemic is not going to be over by Thanksgiving. It's not going to be over by New Year's Eve. It's not going to be over by next month, by the next year, 2021. We will enter 2021 in a pandemic, still in the pandemic. This pandemic may last until March, which is a full year after it really kind of got caught fire here in America. So we may have spent all of an entire year essentially in constant fear of getting sick. And yes, you know what? That is a thing. You can live in fear. These people that act, all the bravado of, I'm not going to live in fear. You should live in fear. You should live in fear of getting sick and dying. You should live in fear of getting in a car wreck. You should live in fear of basically your own mortality because there are so many things in this life that could kill you. And just because you don't think of putting a seatbelt on as being scared of getting injured, that's essentially what's keeping you alive, is that notion of I could get in a wreck. That's how you drive. You drive in the sense of something could happen. You have to constantly keep an eye out around you of what potential hazards there are. If you don't, then you're really running a risk of causing an accident your own by yourself. We do live in fear. It's called nature. Okay, that's the entire. That's survival. Is constantly living in fear of something that could potentially harm you, living in fear of going hungry, living in fear of going broke, living in fear of going cold. This is no different. This is a fear of a pandemic, of a virus, SARS-CoV-2, that's not going away, at least not yet. So what do we do? Well, if you've been following the news, or unless you've been living on a rock on Mars with your fingers in your ears, you know that there are possibilities out there. Pfizer was the first one. Pfizer came out last week saying that their vaccine showed 90% effectiveness. That's really good. That is really good. 90% effectiveness. 90% of the people who get it effectively are okay. So 90% effectiveness is really, really good. So 90% of the people who get the vaccine apparently are able to fight off the virus if they become infected with it. Those really good results. I mean, honestly, really good results. Far better than, again, the attempt at somehow fixing this or attempt at a natural immunity that has been proposed by several people in the political spectrum called herd immunity. That's not going to happen. In order for herd immunity to occur, virtually everybody has to become infected and then survive it. That's not an option. That's really not an option. Even if the mortality rate stays at 3%, that's an incredibly large number of people who will die just from catching the virus so that the rest of us can go about our lives as normal. No, we're not sacrificing people for this. So 90% effectiveness is really good. Problem with Pfizer's vaccine is that it required it to be stored at incredibly low temperatures. You needed a special freezer that most doctors' offices don't have access to, or most health clinics don't have access to. So that was a huge hindrance on this particular vaccine. However, the good thing about Pfizer's vaccine is that it was completely and totally done on their own. They did not have any incentives other than solving this problem of this virus and this pandemic. Now, a better vaccine seems to have also come out not too long ago, just a few days ago. Moderna has announced their vaccine is 95% effective, which is amazingly better than Pfizer's. And the good news is it does not require the supercooling um, of the Pfizer vaccine. So it can be a little bit more widespread and more available to everybody. The problems behind both of these vaccines, aside from the ones I've already mentioned, is that it's not going to be on the market for the general public for several more months. While several million people may receive the vaccine within the next month or two, once we establish that this vaccine is effective and can be given, either if it takes multiple doses, the Pfizer one I think required 2 doses. The Moderna, I haven't found out exactly how many doses that it requires, if it's one or if it's two spread out over several weeks. Either way, the number of doses required to administer to the entirety of the population of the United States and then eventually the world is an incredibly large number. So the logistics behind getting the vaccines, getting the doses, getting them out there to the general public and administering them is a huge task. Even UPS probably couldn't figure this one out, or at least not within a fairly timely manner, or timely for, again, stopping this in its tracks right now. So it still may be several months before we really have a good handle on this. So keep in mind that for the next several months, probably until February, maybe even until March, we're still going to be dealing with this particular virus. We're going to be still dealing with the lack of social interaction. We're going to still be dealing with social distancing and mask wearing because even though we have a vaccine, potentially, it is still a potential thing. It's not a guarantee. Not yet. While I am incredibly ecstatic about getting a vaccine and will be, as soon as I possibly can get one, getting that vaccine, I still am not going to pretend like, okay, everything is all solved now, because it's not all solved. It's not over with. Okay, the virus is still there. The virus is still running rampant through our population. And even though we have a vaccine, we have not received the vaccine yet. And even once we do receive the vaccine, it's still going to be out there because you still have people who are 100% adamant that they're not going to receive the vaccine. They have been inundating themselves or inoculating themselves with conspiracy theories that there's somehow these vaccines are going to be mind control. Look, people have been trying this little tactic for a long time. Fluoride, for example, has been touted as being a mind control drug, making everybody more docile. Keep in mind that fluoride is in virtually every major city and every municipality almost in the entire country in their drinking water. So lots of people drink this water with the fluoride. I don't know if you've seen recently, but not everybody's docile. Not everybody is compliant with the government. So if the government is putting fluoride in our drinking water to make us compliant, they're doing a really, really bad job of it. So the vaccine probably not going to be as effective either as far as keeping everybody compliant to the government. That's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to control this virus. And quite frankly, if we have that opportunity, we should take it. I don't understand how these same people that are complaining about the lockdowns, complaining about wearing a mask, complaining about their rights, are the same ones, or virtually the same ones, who are complaining about not getting a vaccine or adamantly refusing to get a vaccine that doesn't even exist yet, at least not on the market. So there's so much going on right now, and it doesn't seem to stop. I know I did something like this earlier. This is the second time I feel like I've done a video about a lockdown, about mask wearing, about vaccines that don't exist just yet, but could possibly be on the market soon. And the reactions of some people to these particular things, I feel like I'm just repeating myself, and I am repeating myself. This is something that just needs to be said over and over and over again because it's not going away. We don't just say it once and go, wear a mask. No, I'm not going to wear a mask. Okay, fine, I told you to. No, we got to keep harping on this. We got to be nagging. We got to be annoying. We got to be in their face all the time about wearing a mask. And until people see that this is a problem, they're going to refuse that it is a problem. There's been some stories about a nurse in South Dakota who has treated COVID patients. And she said that even on their deathbed, their last breath, their last words are denial of what they're dying of. They don't believe they have COVID. They don't believe that they're dying of COVID. They don't believe that this is even happening to them. They think it's something else. Now, not everybody is in that boat, but there are a lot of people out there who, no matter what, they will refuse that this is happening for whatever reason. They refuse to accept reality, and that reality is we have a virus that is deadly and highly infectious, and it is burning its way through our country and has been for the last 8 months at an incredible rate, and that rate continues to rise every single day. So what do we do? Well, the only thing we can do is wear a mask, socially distance, and wash our hands and maintain good hygiene. That's all any of us can really do. And quite frankly, that's probably going to be enough if we all do it. We just have to all do it. I don't know what else to do except to tell you science literacy is incredibly important right now. There's a lot of people who don't understand science, and it's showing. So please be science literate. That's it for today for me. I'm your host, Andy Epton. Again, please be science literate, and this will all hopefully go away. Just don't know when. Thank you.